Hey, my fellow furniture peeps. I scooped up this outdated oak table from the thrift store because I loved the rounded lines, the fluted legs, and the gorgeous patterned veneer on the top. This kind of curvy 80s postmodern furniture has definitely made a strong comeback in the last little bit, and I think with a more modern finish, this piece could make a pretty profitable flip. I'm pretty sure this table had already been refinished, or at least partially refinished before, because there were some glue and polyurethane drips around the gold banding, and it's kind of hard to see on camera, but the finish on the top was gritty. But I thought I should be able to get that orange stuff off of there relatively easily, and I wanted to give it a lighter, more contemporary wood finish instead. By looking at the underside of the table, it was easy to see that the top was constructed of particle board and some MDF with some nice oak veneer work over the top, but these fluted legs are actually solid oak, which is great. The legs were all attached just by a single bolt, so I undid those and removed them to make my life a little easier. Since the tabletop was veneered, which is basically just really thin pieces of wood stuck down to the substrate underneath, and there's not a lot of material to work with, I took a bit of a cautious approach to removing this old finish. I decided to have a go with my carbide scraper first to see if I could shave that top layer of polyurethane off of the wood, and it was working okay, but after about 15 minutes of that, I thought that maybe I could use my sander with a medium grit sandpaper to do it a little faster. I just need to be careful to watch that I wasn't removing too much material too quickly and accidentally sand right through. Because I didn't want to risk grinding any old silicone or wax residue that might be on there from furniture polishes over the years, I gave the whole table a quick wash with some Simple Green, which has a good degreasing agent in it. And once that was dry, I popped some 150 grit sandpaper onto my Orbital sander and got started slowly removing the rest of the finish from the top with that. When you're strip sanding, and especially when you're strip sanding a veneer, you want to let the machine do the work. So you're just guiding it across the surface. It's a pretty slow process, but in this case, it was quicker than the scraping that I'd started with. It took me about 20 minutes to get all of the finish off the top, and then I went back to my scraper to kind of dig that stuff out of the little ledges around the apron and to get the curved edges started, and then I kept going with the sander on all the flat areas. I should also mention that this brass band around the top is actually just a strip of plastic with a plasticky gold film on it, and a lot of that just peeled off as I was sanding. I'm going to deal with that at the end of this process though. Once I had all of that tough orange stuff gone, I swapped out the 150 grit for some finer 220 to go over everything one more time and smooth things out a bit more to get the wood ready for its new finish. You can really see the color difference here between those two different grits. Onto these legs, I gave the scraper a few swipes to see if that would be a good way to get into these details, but newsflash, a straight blade on a curved surface isn't particularly easy or effective.
How am I gonna do that? Do I want to do chemical stripper?
Then I decided to see how bad sanding these by hand would be.
think if I do chemical stripper on there, I should be able to scrub most of it off with a little nylon brush or wire brush. And then I can give it a quick hand sand once it's dry. Well, let's try. Let's try.
I cut open a trash bag to protect my bench and then popped some cardboard over it to rest the legs on and got out all the stuff that I'd need to strip these. This Circa 1850 stripper is my favorite, but it's pretty nasty stuff, so I needed to wear my respirator, some safety goggles, and chemical resistant gloves with it. I brushed a nice thick layer of the gel over the first two legs, making sure that I got it down into all of those grooves and left it to work its magic for about 30 minutes before I came back to start cleaning things off. I grabbed a little wire brush and re-wet the stripper with a little bit more where it was starting to dry out, and then just started scrubbing until all of that finish pulled away from the wood and balled up in a gross, sticky, but super satisfying mess. I definitely think this was the right way to go for these legs. It took me about 10 minutes per leg to get everything off, and I kind of wished that I'd tried this on the top as well. That's the thing about stripping furniture finishes though. There are a lot of different ways to go about it, and every piece and every finish is going to be unique. So you sort of just have to either use your best judgment from previous experiences or pick one and try it, and just be willing to change methods if you need to. In this case, all three methods would have gotten me there eventually, but I wanted to find the fastest one for each surface I had. Once I'd gotten all four legs cleaned up, I set them aside to let that wood dry out again overnight. The next morning, I gave each leg a quick once over with my sander and a foam pad that contours around those curves just to smooth out any roughness, and I did go back and do all of those divots by hand. Now I was finally ready to apply my new stain. I didn't want the oak to turn back to that natural orange tone when I applied my new sealer to it, so I needed to neutralize that. I grabbed some leftover off-white paint from another project, filled the rest of the jar with water, shook it up, and created a paint wash, or my own white water-based stain. Then I brushed the wash over the entire top surface, and I needed to work quickly so it didn't start to dry on me. And once I had that whole surface covered, I used a microfiber rag to wipe back all of the excess water and pigment. I made sure to go over each section to make sure that it was wiped off in the same direction that the grain was going, just so that if there were any little streaks in the dried wash, they'd be camouflaged in the grain. And since the center sections were all going in different directions, I sort of buffed it in small circular motions until I couldn't see the paint anymore. You can really see the color difference here between the washed wood and the bare wood. That orange on the bottom is what I'm trying to tone down so it doesn't get darker when it's sealed. I kept working around the apron one piece at a time, and then I did the exact same thing on all the legs. I set everything aside to dry, and it was looking okay, but it's a bit like that 80s pink pickled oak, which is still not the vibe I'm going for here, but I wasn't finished with this yet. Once the white paint was dry, I was ready to layer on my next step to bring some warmth and life back to the wood, but in a more contemporary colorway. This General Finishes antique oak stain over top of a light paint wash, I think, is my new favorite way to get a lighter, natural stained wood look. This is water-based again, so I had to move fast to make sure that it didn't start to dry out on me before I could work with it. But I followed the same steps as with the paint wash. I brushed it over each surface and then took a clean rag and wiped it back, always in the direction of the grain. And it just leaves behind this gorgeous warm tone that looks natural, but isn't that super strong orange that we started with. That got another hour or so to dry, which is the beauty of working with all water-based products. And then I was ready to reseal things. I stirred up a can of my favorite top coat, which is Diamond Wood Finish from Varathane in their satin sheen, and strained some of that into my electric sprayer. This stuff can definitely also be brushed on or applied with a foam brush or sponge, but spraying is usually the fastest option for me. I tested out my settings on a scrap piece of wood, and since this is a pretty thin consistency product, I ended up turning my airflow down to a level 3, and I had my material flow knob opened up about halfway. I sprayed on a total of 3 coats of this over each surface, and I did end up going over everything with a fine grit sanding sponge in between coats, but somehow didn't record myself doing that either time. But once that last coat was dry enough, I popped the table back up onto my workbench and painted over the messy bottom with some more neutral paint just to clean it up a bit. I reinstalled the legs, and then to finish things off, I masked off this poor plastic band and brushed on some of this ebony Rub and Buff metallic wax. This is a self-sealing product, so once it's dry, it will hold on to there just fine and gives this beautiful matte black metallic finish. Okay, let's go back and take a quick look at the 80s orange postmodern table that we started with. And here is what my more contemporary version is looking like now. I absolutely love the new color of this beautiful oak, and I feel like you can actually see all of the details better now with this softer, more natural finish. I paid $20 for this table at the thrift store. I probably invested about $30 worth of materials in sandpaper, paint, stain, and top coat, and worked on it for about 8 hours over the course of 2 days. I've seen new tables with a similar style for sale at big box furniture and home decor retailers in the $300 to $600 range, so I think this is definitely a worthwhile flip. As always, thank you for hanging out with me today as I worked on this makeover. I hope you were able to pick up some helpful tips and tricks to use on one of your own furniture projects one day. I'm going to leave some more refinishing videos here for you to watch next if you want, and I will catch you all next time.